What if the person you trusted most left you in the worst situation of your life? That's exactly what happened to me at a five-star hotel. But when an old receptionist handed me a secret from my father's past, everything changed in an instant. Stay with me, because you won't see this ending coming when my son, David, and his wife Lisa invited me for a weekend at the Grand Royal Hotel. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. A five-star hotel, I repeated, just to make sure I'd heard right. David grinned, that same mischievous smile he had as a boy when he'd sneak cookies before dinner. You deserve it, Mom, after everything you've done for us. Well, let me tell you, my heart just about melted. Maybe, I thought, all those years of babysitting, last-minute school pickups, and emergency soup deliveries had finally paid off. I spent the whole week before the trip in a flurry of excitement. I pulled out my best dress, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. I dusted off my favorite lipstick, a shade of red that made me feel 10 years younger, and tucked my lucky bingo charm into my purse. You never know, right? Maybe they had a casino in the hotel, or at least a game night. I even got my hair done. And let me tell you, the stylist gave me so much volume, I was worried I'd set off the hotel's smoke alarms. The morning of our trip, barely slept a wink. I kept checking my suitcase, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. Toothbrush? Check. Reading glasses? Check. Extra pair of comfortable shoes? Double check. I even packed a little sewing kit just in case. You can take the girl out of the Midwest, but you can't take the Midwest out of the girl. When David and Lisa picked me up, I could tell they were just as excited. Lisa wore a new dress, and David had on a crisp shirt I'd never seen before. We're going to have so much fun, Mom, Lisa said, squeezing my hand. I smiled, feeling a little flutter of nerves and excitement. It had been years since I'd stayed anywhere fancier than a roadside motel. And the idea of a five-star hotel felt almost unreal. As we pulled up to the Grand Royal Hotel, my jaw dropped. The building was enormous, with gleaming glass windows, and a doorman in a uniform so sharp you could cut yourself just looking at it. The lobby was like something out of a movie, marble floors that shone like mirrors, sparkling chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a palace, and fresh flowers everywhere. I half expected to see a movie star lounging on one of the velvet sofas, sipping champagne. The check-in process was a breeze, and before I knew it, we were whisked up to our rooms. And let me tell you, my room was bigger than my first apartment. There was a king-sized bed with pillows so fluffy I thought I might sink right in and disappear. The bathroom had a tub big enough to swim laps in, and the towels were so soft I considered sneaking one into my suitcase. Don't worry, I didn't. But I thought about it. After we settled in, David and Lisa took me on a tour of the hotel. There was a spa, a rooftop pool, and even a little boutique with clothes so fancy I was afraid to touch them. We stopped for lunch at one of the hotel's restaurants, and I tried sushi for the first time. Now, I'll admit I had no idea what I was eating. There was this green stuffed wasabi, I think, that nearly blew the top of my head off. My sinuses have never been clearer. David laughed so hard he nearly choked on his miso soup, and Lisa had to dab her eyes with her napkin. You're braver than I am, Mom, she said. And I felt a little burst of pride. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of laughter and new experiences. We lounged by the pool, sipping fruity drinks with little umbrellas in them. I got a massage. At the spa, my first ever, I nearly fell asleep on the table. At one point, I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror and hardly recognized the relaxed, glowing woman smiling back. When was the last time I'd felt so pampered, so cared for? That evening, we dressed up for dinner at the hotel's fancy restaurant. The menu was full of things I couldn't pronounce, but the waiter was kind and helped me pick out a delicious chicken dish. We toasted with glasses of wine, and David made a little speech about how grateful he was for everything I'd done for him over the years. I'll admit I got a little teary-eyed. Lisa squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. After dinner, we took a walk around the hotel grounds. The gardens were lit up with twinkling lights, and there was a gentle breeze that carried the scent of roses. We talked and laughed, sharing stories from the past and dreams for the future. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen and appreciated, not just as a mother or a grandmother, but as myself. As I climbed into bed that night, I couldn't help but think, this is too good to be true. But I pushed the thought aside, determined to enjoy every moment. After all, how often does a weekend like this come along? I drifted off to sleep with a smile on my face, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing just around the corner. Because, as my mother always said, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Sunday morning dawned with a kind of golden sunlight that makes you believe all is right in the world. I woke up in that cloud-soft bed, stretched like a cat, and padded over to the window to take in the view. The city sparkled below, and for a moment I let myself believe I really was living the high life. I slipped into my robe, made myself a cup of coffee from the fancy little machine, which, by the way, took me 3 tries to figure out, and sat by the window, feeling like the Queen of England surveying her kingdom. I even practiced my royal wave. Just in case anyone was watching, David and Lisa joined me for breakfast in the hotel's sunlit dining room. We laughed about the night before, and Lisa teased me about my sushi adventure. I was just about to ask if we could squeeze in one more spa treatment before checkout when David glanced at his watch and stood up abruptly. "Well, Mom, this has been great," he said, patting my hand. "Thanks for the stay." Lisa flashed me a quick, nervous smile, and before I could even process what was happening, they were out the door, suitcases in hand, faster than you can say room service. I sat there, blinking, my coffee halfway to my lips. Did I miss something? Was this some kind of joke? I looked around, expecting them to pop back in, laughing and saying, "Gotcha." But the only thing that greeted me was the waiter, who handed me a small, elegant envelope. "Your bill, ma'am," he said with a polite nod. I opened it, and my heart dropped straight into my shoes. I hadn't seen numbers like that since my last hospital bill, and at least insurance covered some of that. My hands started to shake. I scanned the list: room charges, spa treatments, fancy dinners, and why did I order that second glass of wine? It all added up to a sum that made my head spin. I felt the color drain from my face. Was this really happening? Was I about to become the first grandmother in history to be thrown out of a 5-star hotel for non-payment? Panic set in. I started running through my options. Should I call my bank and beg for a temporary loan? Should I try to negotiate with the manager? Or maybe I could offer to wash dishes in the hotel kitchen, though. Let's be honest. The last time I tried to use an industrial dishwasher, I nearly flooded the church basement. Can you imagine me in a hairnet, scrubbing pots and pans while the chef yells at me in French? I almost laughed, but the lump in my throat was too big. I glanced around the lobby, hoping for a miracle. The other guests looked so calm, so put together, as if paying a small fortune for a weekend getaway was just another Sunday for them. I, on the other hand, was starting to sweat through my blouse. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I wondered if I should just make a run for it. But where would I go? I'd left my car at home. I certainly wasn't about to hitchhike in my Sunday best. Just as I was about to faint right there on the marble floor, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. I turned to see an elderly receptionist making her way toward me. She was a small woman with silver hair pulled back into a neat bun and eyes that twinkled with a secret. She moved slowly, but with a kind of quiet confidence that made me feel for just a moment like everything might be okay. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice gentle and warm. "Are you Mr. Anderson's daughter?" The question caught me off guard. My father had passed away years ago, and I hadn't heard anyone mention his name in ages. "Yes, I am," I replied, curiosity momentarily distracting me from my financial crisis. Her eyes softened, and she smiled a real, genuine smile that made me feel like I was back in my childhood kitchen, safe and loved. "I worked for your father for 33 years, she said quietly. "He was a good man. Before he died, he gave me something to hold on to for you. He said, 'Give this envelope to my daughter when you see her.'" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a thick, old envelope yellowed with age and sealed with a bit of wax. My hands trembled as I took it from her. For a moment the world seemed to stop. The panic, the embarrassment. The fear all of it faded away as I stared at my father's familiar handwriting on the front. I looked up at the receptionist, my eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. She patted my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "He always said you were stronger than you knew," she said softly, "and that you'd find your way no matter what." As she walked away, I sat there in the grand lobby, clutching the envelope and the bill, my heart pounding for a whole new reason. What could possibly be inside? And how, after all these years, had my father managed to reach out to me at the exact moment I needed him most? I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes, and prepared to open the envelope, hoping, praying, that whatever was inside would be enough to save me from this 5-star fiasco. Asterisk. The envelope felt heavier than it appeared, as if it carried not just paper, but the weight of years and memories. My hands shook so much I almost let it slip onto the polished marble floor. I glanced up at the elderly receptionist, her eyes gentle and understanding, as if she knew exactly what this moment meant to me. For a fleeting second, I was transported back to my childhood, to those evenings when my father would return from work with his pockets full of tiny treasures of peppermint. A shiny coin, a note scribbled on a scrap of paper. He always had a way of making me feel safe, even when the world felt overwhelming. And now, here I was, clutching a bill I couldn't pay and an envelope from a man who'd been gone for years. Feeling like a little girl all over again. Taking a deep breath, I slid my finger under the flap and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter, the paper soft and worn at the edges, and a check. My eyes widened as I read the amount on the check. It was more than enough to cover the hotel bill enough. In fact, for a few extra nights, a couple of spa treatments, and maybe even a little shopping spree at the boutique downstairs. I let out a shaky laugh, half in disbelief, half in relief. Trust my father to come to my rescue, even from beyond the grave. But it was the letter that truly moved me. I unfolded it slowly, savoring the familiar loops and swirls of his handwriting. The words seemed to leap off the page, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means life has thrown you a curveball. Something I always admired about you was your ability to keep going, no matter what. I know I wasn't always the easiest person to live with, but I hope you know how proud I am of the woman you've become. I set aside this little nest egg for you just in case you ever found yourself in a tough spot. Think of it as a rainy day fund, or maybe just a reminder that you're never truly alone. Even when it feels like the world is against you, remember you're stronger than you realize. You've weathered storms before, and you'll get through this one too. And if you ever need a little extra courage, just look in the mirror. You'll find it there, with all my love." Dad, I read the letter once, then again, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. I could almost hear his voice, gentle and steady, just as it was when he'd tuck me in at night. I laughed and cried at the same time, the sound echoing through the grand lobby. Imagine that, my father always thinking ahead, making sure I'd be okay even when he couldn't be there himself. The receptionist watched me with a knowing smile, as if she'd witnessed this kind of magic before. "He was a good man," she said softly. "He talked about you all the time. Said you had his stubborn streak." I chuckled, dabbing at my eyes with a napkin I grabbed from the breakfast table. "That's one way to put it," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. For a while, I just sat there, letting it all sink in. The panic and embarrassment from earlier faded away, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude. I thought about all the times I'd worried about being alone, about not having anyone to rely on. And here was proof, real, undeniable proof that I was never truly alone. My father had found a way to reach me, to help me, even when I least expected it. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in days. I walked over to the front desk, the check and letter clutched tightly in my hand. The receptionist helped me settle the bill, her eyes sparkling with quiet satisfaction. "You know," she said, "your father once told me that family is like a safety net. Sometimes you can't see it, but it's always there to catch you." I smiled, thinking of all the ways my family had surprised me both, good and bad over the years. With the bill paid and my dignity restored, I decided to treat myself to one last indulgence. I booked a massage at the spa using a bit of the extra money from the check. As I lay there, warm stones easing the tension from my shoulders, I thought about how life has a strange way of working out. One moment you're on the edge of disaster. The next, you're being saved by a message from the past. After my spa treatment, I wandered through the hotel gardens, the letter tucked safely in my purse. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I realized that while my son's actions had hurt me, they'd also led me to this moment, a reminder of my father's love, and of my own strength by the time I checked out. I was almost grateful for the whole ordeal. I left a generous tip for the receptionist, thanking her for her kindness and for keeping my father's secret all these years. As I walked out of the Grand Royal Hotel, I felt taller, stronger, and more connected to my family than ever before. Life, I realized, is full of surprises. Some are painful, some are beautiful, and some, like an old envelope from a loved one, are a little bit of both. And as I stepped out into the sunlight, I knew I could face whatever came next, with a little help from those who loved me, both here and gone. Asterisk. I paid the bill, my hands steady now, and left a tip for the receptionist that was as generous as my heart could manage. She had been the quiet hero of my weekend, holding on to my father's secret for all those years, and then delivering it at the exact moment I needed it most. As I walked out of the Grand Royal Hotel, the automatic doors whooshed open, and I stepped into the crisp morning air with my head held high. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few days lift off my shoulders. The city bustled around me, but I felt like I was floating lighter than I'd been in years. I glanced back at the hotel, its grand facade gleaming in the sunlight, and couldn't help but smile. What a weekend it had been. I'd arrived feeling like a guest of honor, been blindsided by a bill that could have paid for a small car, and then rescued by a message from my father that reminded me just how much love can endure after someone is gone. I thought about David and Lisa, and I'll admit, a little part of me was still stinging from their sudden exit. I mean, who leaves their own mother with a bill like that? But as I stood there, letter from my father tucked safely in my purse, I realized that life and family are rarely as simple as we want them to be. I started walking, my suitcase rolling behind me, and let my mind wander back over the years. Family, I thought, is a funny thing. They can drive you up the wall, break your heart, and then, in the next breath, remind you why you love them so much in the first place. I remembered the time David broke his arm falling out of the old oak tree in our backyard, and how I'd sat up all night in the hospital, holding his hand and promising him everything would be okay. I remembered Lisa's first Thanksgiving with us, how nervous she'd been to impress me, and how we'd ended up laughing over burnt rolls and lumpy gravy. We'd had our share of ups and downs, but through it all, we'd always found our way back to each other. This weekend, though, had been a new kind of test. I felt betrayed, embarrassed, and more than a little scared. But I'd also discovered a strength in myself that I didn't know I still had. I'd faced down a 5-star disaster, found help in the most unexpected place, walked away with a story I'd be telling for years. And isn't that what life is all about? Picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and finding the humor in the chaos. As I waited for my ride, I thought about the letter from my father. His words echoed in my mind. You're stronger than you think, and you're never alone. I realized that even though he was gone, his love was still with me, guiding me, lifting me up when I needed it most. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real gift he'd left behind. Not the envelope, but the reminder that I could handle whatever life threw my way. I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to let this experience make me bitter. Instead, I'd use it as a Lucena reminder to expect the unexpected, to keep my sense of humor, and to always trust in the love that surrounds me, even when it comes from the most surprising places. I even found myself chuckling as I imagined telling this story at my next book club meeting. You think your kids are a handful? I'd say. Let me tell you about the time mine left me holding the bill at a five-star hotel. And you know what? Realized I wasn't alone. I bet every woman out there has a story like this. Maybe not about a hotel bill, but about being left in a lurch by family, or being saved by a guardian angel just when things seemed hopeless. Maybe it was a friend who showed up with a casserole when you were sick, or a neighbor who mowed your lawn when you couldn't. Maybe it was a stranger's smile on a hard day, or a letter from someone you loved, arriving just when you needed it most. So, ladies, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been left in a bind by your own family? Or maybe you've had a guardian angel swoop in at the last minute. Share your stories in the comments side. Love to laugh, cry, and celebrate with you. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're all in this together. And sometimes the best way to get through life's surprises is to share them with people who understand. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real-life tales, laughter, and a little bit of wisdom. Because, let's face it, we all need a good story and a good laugh now and then. Life is unpredictable, family is complicated, and sometimes the only thing you can do is hold your head high. Trust in the love that surrounds you and keep moving forward. As my ride pulled up, I took one last look at the Grand Royal Hotel, feeling grateful for the lessons learned and the love that had carried me through. I climbed in, ready for whatever adventure came next, knowing that no matter what, I had the strength and the stories to see me through. So until next time, keep your chin up, your heart open, and your sense of humor close. You never know when you'll need them.